Today I want to talk about the Outin Nano and how to pour the perfect espresso shot with this little magical espresso machine. I did a review on it, an open boxing review, and then I took it on a 30-day cross-country road trip. And it came in super handy for me on the go, using just the heating element in it, pouring my shot, and being able to actually have espresso every morning on our road trip. This thing is super fantastic, but when you use an espresso machine and you're a barista, or you're not a barista and you use an espresso machine, you may not understand the aspects of espresso. Or if you are a barista, you may just be like, well, you know, I'm used to tamping a portafilter that's a real portafilter and not something like this. So I want to talk about how we're going to get our perfect espresso shot from our Outin Nano. And then we're gonna pour our espresso shot, and I'm gonna talk about how I use this on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, I'm using the Outin Nano and I'm not using the heating element in it. And this allows me to literally plug it in once a week. I probably could go longer than once a week, but I'd stick it on the charger once a week just because it's in my kitchen. I'm charging phones and stuff in here anyways, so the USB-C charger's always around. I can just pour espresso all day if I'm not using the heating element. So that's something I didn't talk about in my last video. Today we're not gonna use the heating element, but all of these tricks with the espresso and making a great perfect espresso with this thing is gonna come in handy whether you're using the internal heating element or not. Let's go ahead and get into it. Let's grind some coffee. We're gonna talk about that, and then tamp this sucker and get our best espresso that we can pour out of this thing. The roast that you're gonna use on your espresso matters a lot to how it's going to taste. And today I'm using a very light roast, which I actually enjoy a lot with espresso. A lot of people are doing espresso using a medium to dark roast or even a very dark roast. And I really dislike dark roast espressos. I started with drinking dark roast espressos, but once you get introduced to a light or light to medium roast espresso, you don't really want to go back. It adds so much fun bitterness and nice tweaks to the flavor profile that you just cannot get with a darker espresso. And I really highly recommend everybody trying that. So today we're using this Ethiopian coffee that I got, and I actually didn't roast this, although I do roast my own coffee. But it is, let me see if I can get you guys a good shot of it. But it is relatively light. So it's like, I would call like a cinnamon roast or city maybe. And it's pretty dang light. So we're gonna go ahead and grind some up, and that is the first thing. You need to get your grind just right. So I use this, and it actually comes in pretty handy. I'll link it in the description. I'm probably going to upgrade to an electric grinder soon, but as of right now, this guy's getting me by just fine, and it's a hand crank grinder. Takes me a few minutes to get my grind ready in the morning, and I like to grind enough so I can get myself 3 shots, and it's like 3 almost double shots. So that's another thing. We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's grind up some coffee. All right, I think that's enough. So that's my grind. And let me talk about the 4 things that are going to change your espresso. So your grind, so how fine your grind is, and it's gonna change for all of your beans. Any roast you change up, you might have to change your grind depending. How much quantity you put into your portafilter, how hard you tamp it, and then how much water you're pushing through it. All these things are going to change how your espresso is going to turn out. The temperature of the water is important too, but those 4 things, the fineness of your grind, the amount you tamp it, the quantity that you put into your portafilter, and the quantity of water that you push through it are all gonna change how your espresso tastes significantly and which coffee you're using in your actual brew. So let's go ahead and tamp this in and get us a shot. So let me start my water heating up on the stove. So while my water's heating up, I'm gonna go ahead and pour some in. I like to grab this with my hand like this, giving my fingers a little bit above the edge so that when I pour it in, I can be a little heaping with it, and my fingers are gonna make it so that it doesn't go. So I just pour it directly in. They did give you the measuring cup, but my grinder's not big enough to get it in. So I just pour it in how I like it. So mine is slightly heaping, and then I go ahead and I give it a subtle tamp while my fingers are still there. And then I push in from the edges. So I get all the stuff in from the edges, and then I use my other finger and get it all in. And I like to give it a decent tamp without pushing full hand on it. So I'm giving it a little bit of a tamp. I go around, and as you see, there's some on the edges. This is from being a barista for years. I've always done this with my actual tamp. I would go around and tap the edges of the portafilter. That's not the end though, because when you do this, you're creating fissures in your puck, and fissures are like cracks through your puck. So you don't want those cracks to be there, but I'm just getting it off the edge so that I use every bit of coffee that's in there, and it's actually gonna all soak evenly. So my personal preference is to do this. I'm giving it that, and then I go around, and lastly, I'm gonna put my palm over it, and I'm gonna give it a good amount of pressure. And this is, for me, you're gonna have to experiment with this. You're not going to get a perfect shot on your first go. So your first try, your first 5 tries is never gonna be the perfect shot. So that's about my tamp right there. And then with this guy, you put this piece back on top, and then you set it into this. And after that, you're gonna twist that on. And we'll pour it into my glass espresso thing here. And I actually owned a coffee shop for, 7 years. I worked for 14 years total in the coffee industry. So I've done this a lot. Now at the back of the inside of your water chamber here, you have a 50 milliliter, a 70 milliliter, and a max. If you're gonna get a good tasting espresso, I would never go to the max, and I go slightly under the 70. So it's giving me less than a double shot, but it's more than a single shot. And we'll see how much quantity it pushes through, because my cup actually measures in ounces. So we'll know how much quantity it pushes through. My water's almost done. So let's pour water and let's get this going. And yes, I have a pretty gross tea kettle. So I'm going just below the 70. And the beauty of this is actually you could go more and then just stop it ahead of time. I'm gonna angle you guys lower here for a second. I'm gonna hold it over the top and we're gonna pour it in. So to get it to just go without heating it, you're gonna just double tap this, and then it'll just start pouring. It'll stop pouring when all the water's pushed through, but you can tap it again to stop it ahead of time if you want a ristretto or a short pull. So ristretto would be short pull. All right, let's go. I'm gonna go ahead and angle you down, and we're gonna go ahead with this. I'm gonna set this aside because we're not using it today. So we're gonna go ahead. And I actually haven't charged this week at all. So hopefully it doesn't die on us. And right now we're getting a really pretty color coming out of it. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom you in. So we got about 1.5 ounces of a pull here. And with espresso, there are layers. If you're not seeing these distinct layers, you're not getting the right shot. Your heart at the bottom, your body, and your crema at the top. So your heart is the deep black in the bottom. Your body is going to be this amount that is kind of cascading down to it from your crema. And if you're not seeing these 3 layers, you didn't pour a great shot of espresso. Now we'll go ahead and taste our espresso and see if it turned out well. That's so good. It's almost fruity, bitter, sweet. Everything I want from espresso. It still has that deep roastiness, but not like burnt, like you're tasting just roast. That's what you get with a dark espresso, this light espresso. It pulled perfectly for me. If you've never had a perfect shot of espresso, I highly recommend get a light to medium roast and play with your quantities. Play with your tamp, play with your grind. Get it so that you're pushing pressure through there. If your espresso's coming through too fast, you're not gonna get a good shot. And if you notice, actually, after a little while, if you let it sit, all the layers will combine, but right after you pour, you should be seeing those layers, those distinct layers. I mean, my crema is still there. If you ever get an espresso shot with no crema at a coffee shop, you should return your espresso shot. Just saying. But all right, you can get a perfect shot of espresso every time on this guy if you get all of your stuff down. If you have any other questions about how to get a perfect shot of espresso, please just let me know. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this, more travel videos, talking about travel gear and all that fun stuff. And please leave comments if you have any questions on the Outin Nano. This will be linked in the description. Go ahead and pick yours up and have fun making some of the best espresso of your life with a portable machine. Now check out our first video on Route 66 if you haven't seen it yet, and we're gonna be posting the next one within the next week. So have a great day. We'll see you next time. Peace out. Go have fun with your travels. Have fun making good espresso. Later, guys. Have one.